Hello everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about sharpening pastel pencils because it really is the bane of my life and the bane of a lot of people's lives because it can be really quite difficult. Pastel pencils by their very nature are quite crumbly and they're quite delicate as well, so you do need to be careful with them. So one of the first things I'd say is that we've got different pencils here and different pencils have to be treated in different ways. So we've got a little array here. We have the Caran d'Ache, lovely, beautiful pigmented pastel pencils. We have a Stabilo Carbothello, I've also got a blunt one. We've got the Faber-Castell and we've got a Derwent, just to give you a sort of a good idea of how different pencils sharpen. I have the Swordfish Icon here. I do use other little cheap sharpeners as well, which actually work really nicely. But the Icon is quite a good one. I've used it in the past quite a lot and I've just gone back to it recently. And it's quite good for some of the thinner pencils. So here I'm just going to try, actually I think I'll try it with this one first of all. I mean, this is already a fairly good point. This is a Faber-Castell. I'm going to pop it in there. It's a nice size for the swordfish. It fits in nicely. The main thing when you're using a sharpener is to be gentle and don't go too far. The minute you go too far, as might happen in this video, you can end up blunting it. So what I try and do is just a couple of little turns and then take it out and have a look at it. And actually for me, that's quite a nice point. Yes, you could get a tiny little bit more sort of spike on the end, but I actually quite like working with that sort of point. And then notice I've got a bit of sandpaper here. If I want to get it any sharper or get a particular style of point for my work, I can always use sandpaper to shave it into the kind of point that I want. Okay. We're going to try another pencil in it, a Derwent. I don't think I've actually tried a Derwent in it. Derwent's just a little bit, got a bit more of a fat barrel, so I don't know how it will do in here, but we'll try it. So again, I'm just going to do 3 turns. I don't want to break it off. Okay, so that's come out sort of quite blunt. It's not really got a nice sort of point to it. So I'm going to pop it back in, and when you're using these sharpeners, make sure that the pencil goes all the way in. Don't be too brutish with it, but really sort of push it into the sharpener, and then hold the sharpener down on the table as hard as you can. And we're just going to do a couple of turns. Overdo it and it'll end up breaking. But yeah, it's got a sort of a fairly nice shape to it. If you want to, as I say, if you want to get that really nice sort of sharp point, you can actually use a sharpener to do so. Sorry, a piece of sandpaper to do so. And you can kind of shave both sides of it like that. And keep any of this because you can use that in your drawing as well. And then I'm just sharpening that on the, sanding it on the side. Sanding it on the side, and it depends what sort of point you want, because actually that, I don't know if you can see in focus, see if that's focusing, yeah, just about there. Not sure if you can see that, but it's actually sort of got like a sort of like a flat edge that way and a flat edge that way, rather than a point. It could actually make quite a nice mark. There's all sorts of things you can do with sandpaper, and then obviously you can get your sort of traditional really sharp point as well. But you know, in my experience, you don't need a super sharp point, because yes, they look pretty and yes, they look nice, but 2 or 3 strokes later and you'll be back to square one. So you know, when I'm making marks, I'm generally sort of making sort of fairly firm marks with the pastel pencil anyway, and then if I need to shape them into sort of something a little bit finer, I'll use something like a shaper, which is a silicone tool which kind of shapes some of the marks that I make on the page, which I find works quite well. But to me, that, you know, that would be quite good for certainly absolutely fine for base layers, for layers, you know, for texturizing layers and so on. though of course obviously getting a really nice sharp pencil for the top layers is also quite nice too. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try the Faber-Castell ordinary pencil sharpener with a Faber-Castell pencil. This looks like it's a brand new pencil. Got a tiny little nib on them. They don't come particularly well sharpened. And I'm just going to sharpen very gently. Might try the bigger hole actually for it. This is a brand new sharpener and you can see it's not really making it super sharp. But you know, it will do. Use what you have. Just be gentle. The amount of times I'm not gentle with it. So the smaller one actually works a bit better for getting some of the lead off around the side. The other thing you can do and bear in mind is that this barrel can be quite thick. I mean, the Faber-Castells are some of the smallest pencils, but even so, they can sometimes get stuck. And so what happens when you're sharpening, this wooden part gets stuck in the pencil sharpener, and then because it's kind of trying to work too hard, it then ends up breaking off the edge. So if you just take off a little bit of the wooden barrel, so to speak, at the top, with a bit of a, I'm turning the pencil in my hand, and I've just got an ordinary Stanley knife, like a little sort of travel one, and I'm just scraping off tiny little bits, tilting it, moving it. I'm holding it quite loosely when I'm doing that as well, so in the past I've kind of been a bit too rough with it and you can end up snapping it. You've just got to remember everything that you do with pastel pencils has to be really delicate and really gentle. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of the barrel off there, as you can see. Let's give it another go, really gently. That's a bit too, let's try the bigger one. Yeah, it's not really letting us do any more than that. We'll give it another go with the swordfish icon. Popping it in, holding it down. Let's just do two rolls round, and actually that's a really nice point. Okay, so that's great with that. So the other one I wanted to talk about was the Caran d'Ache pastel pencil. Again, really quite fragile, beautiful pencils though. Let's just have a little look here. Again, exactly the same. I would want to be getting the barrel off. Now you can sharpen these all the way through to the point, or you can sharpen just this bit off here and then try and get a sharper point with a pencil sharpener. Do whatever's best for you and what works for you. But I'm holding this. The important thing is not to grip this so hard that when you're doing that and obviously using a scalpel to shave it, you're actually ending up being really quite brutal and it's going to break on you. Okay, so I'm holding it very loosely in my hand, and then I'm using my thumb and I'm pushing and at the same time as pushing the Stanley blade, I'm also sort of turning. And don't worry too much about it, you know, just feel your way through. All we want to do is get a little bit of this wood off, okay? So however you do it, but just do it gently. But yeah, I find it works quite well just sort of tilting it in my hand. And also I'm angling this slightly upwards, so I'm not angling it down. If you angle it down, you're sort of cutting into the pastel pencil. So by angling this upwards, you're going to sort of create a lighter cut. So I'm just carrying on, moving around, really gentle. Every time I catch myself being a bit heavy-handed with it. You know, I'm not perfect at this, but you know, this is sort of years of sort of trial and error as to what works for me. You know, people try different pastel pencil sharpeners out there, all to good effect. You use what's good for you, but hopefully this gives you a few tips. So I'm holding my breath as I'm doing this. And you can even get a little bit of this wooden barrel off just down here, so that when you are putting it into any pastel pen, any sharpeners later on, it's going to not be quite as fat. Or we could just write to the manufacturers and ask them not to make such fat pencils, or get sharpeners that where it fits in an ideal world. So you can see there that that's really quite, you know, sort of shaved down compared to what it was. So actually let's try the Caran d'Ache in here. So let's go for the bigger hole, because obviously it's a big pencil, and just really, really, really gently pushing, twiddling that round. It's not really doing an awful lot, to be fair. Okay, so let's try the swordfish icon. So again, pushing that in there. This is not product placement for this. It's just a sharpener that I like. Okay, so let's just do, I'm pressing this down into here. Okay, wow, look at that. That is beautiful. So we really like that. I'd be so careful with that. Be careful when you put it back down on your desk as well. You know, that point's not going to last forever. But if you do have a tiny, tiny little details that you want to do at the very end of whatever it is that you're working on, I mean, that's going to give you a beautiful point. But as I say, save it for the absolute peak details, because you don't need that all the way through. All right. So that's that there. What else shall we sharpen? Let's try a Stabilo Carbothello. These are quite crumbly as well. These are beautiful pencils. They're all beautiful. This is quite crumbly. Again, you have to be super careful with it. Because it is a bit thinner, I don't tend to use a scalpel with this one. Let's just try this ordinary pencil sharpener here. Nope, that's just blunting it. It's just getting off a bit. But yeah, this is not very impressive at all. So let's try the swordfish icon. And this, okay, it's not done an amazing job of it, but it's okay. You could pop it back in again and get a little bit of a sharper point. Again, pushing it right into the barrel, placing your fist firm down on it to sort of hold it onto the desk. And let's do a couple there. Nope, and that's blunted it. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this instance, I'll be like, oh, okay, whatever. Let's try this method where, again, we're just shaving the top. So getting really quite a strange shape at the top here. But we're getting it nice and shaved. Okay, so I've actually shown up quite a bit of the pigment there, the pastel. So that is really quite a nice lot of pastel. And then the only other option I'm going to have in this instance is to use some sandpaper. So I'm going to be holding the sandpaper down, and very, very gently on its side I'm going to be creating a shape. And I know a lot of people use these pigments. You can, you know, basically create, it's like a pan pastel. You can tap them into little jars. So this sandpaper is just ordinary sandpaper. It's what I had to hand. Obviously you can go for a sort of a thinner, finer grade, might be quite nice. I did have some of that somewhere, I can't find it. And just create the shape that you want, you know, depending on what you're drawing. So that's a really, really nice flat edge. I'm using it completely on its side, and I'm creating a really super flat edge there. Let's see if you can see that. Can you see how that's really nice and super flat? Now you can do the other side exactly the same. Let's go Okay, so that's really super sharp. And actually when you're then creating some details, let's have a look at how that would sort of create details. So, you know, that's creating really quite a nice, slightly chunkier line than the ones we had before, but still quite sharp. So I'm reasonably happy with that. You can go even further then if you want that sort of spherical point, and then you can do either side. Other side. And then like that. And it really does depend what you're drawing as to what sort of shape you want. But you know, you can keep going until you get that sort of perfect point, but just be gentle with it. With everything, whatever method you use, just be gentle is the biggest tip that I can give you. And get the barrel of the pencil nice and you know, nice and thin. Okay, doesn't look as pretty as putting it into a pencil sharpener, but as long as your work looks pretty, that is the main thing. What else? Let's try a Derwent. Let's try sharpening a Derwent. Again, I'm just going to, I'm holding it very, very lightly in my hand and I'm putting my thumb there, but gently with my thumb, and I'm pushing the scalpel here, and I'm just getting rid of the base. Before I worry about the pastel itself, I'm literally just getting rid of this base. It's getting in the way. And this can be quite therapeutic as well, actually. It's it can be a pain. But you know, at the start of your session, if you know you're going into your top details, I won't worry too much with your base layers. I work with all the tutorials that I do, I work with base layers, and then we work up and we work up and we work up. You don't need, and actually can be to your disadvantage, to have super sharp pencils on those early stages, because you want to fill the tooth with lots of lovely pigment, not fine details initially. If you know that you're coming into sort of a detailed stage and all your pencils are blunt, and you know you're sort of fed up with your sharpener, then just take a little bit of time out to get some nice sharp or you know sort of usable edges to your pastel pencils before you start. Play a bit of music and have a sharpening session. Okay, so I'm just exposed the top there. There's a bit of glue as well that sometimes on there you want to get that off, because that gets stuck in pencil sharpeners, and it's just the glue from the wooden casing. So let's just do, so just very lightly. So I've exposed it, okay, and then let's get rid of that for a minute. Use that on there, and again, just sharpening it. If you want a really super flat, sharp edge, you have to sharpen a bit longer and a bit harder. Not harder, but sort of for a bit longer. Yeah, beautiful colour, love it. You can get to know your colours this way as well. Okay, so I've actually got quite a nice tip there, even though it doesn't look very pretty. Actually, if I then want to come along and do a really sharp point, look how nice and thin that comes out. Okay, and then you can go a little bit further and go either side, just to sort of even it up a little bit. And also when you're using something like the pastel mat has a bit of an abrasive action anyway. So when you're drawing, you're naturally obviously wearing it down. But you know, sort of twiddle as you go. So you know, if you're doing sort of some strokes, don't just use the same part of the pencil unless you're trying to shave that part down. Use different parts of the pencil, you know, twiddling it as you go, and then it will just keep it sharpened. And have a piece of sandpaper on the side so that you can kind of give it a little bit of a clean up as you need to. Okay, I hope that helped. There are lots of different sharpeners on the market that you can, feel free to try. And don't turn your nose up at completely cheap sharpeners either, because sometimes they can get a really nice point. Play around with it, but as long as you know how to use your scalpel and some sandpaper, then worst case scenario, if your pencil sharpeners aren't behaving themselves, then you can use this method instead. Hope that helps, and see you on the next tutorial.